NRA board member Amanda Suffecool on the gun rights group's Restructuring. That and more on this episode of the Weekly Reload Podcast.
No, the devil's got no hold on me.
All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Weekly Reload Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Gutowski. I'm also the founder of thereload.com, where you can head over and sign up for our free weekly newsletter if you want to keep up to date with what's going on with guns in America from a sober, serious perspective that focuses on hard news reporting and analysis. This week, we are discussing the state of the National Rifle Association, one of the largest gun rights groups in the country, one of the most impactful. And to do that, we have with us board member Amanda Suffecool, who's on the show for the first time. Welcome to the show, Amanda.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm generally on the other side as a consumer of your news. So,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But you are somebody who is well positioned to understand what is going on at the NRA and can speak to some of the questions I think people have right now at the moment. And I'm glad that you were willing to come on and share your perspective and some information on the group with us.
sure, anything,
Yeah.
it's a good opportunity to speak about the NRA because the NRA is near and dear to my heart.
Absolutely. And so can you just walk us through a little bit of your background? How did you come to be on the NRA board? You're a relatively new board member, but I would say you're also a relatively important one in my view of the organization at this point. And what committees do you serve on? How did you get to this position?
Well, so I tried for about 4 years to get nominated on the board I'm a retired engineer and I was just at the waning end of my career, and it was like, what am I going to do next? What do I want to do? And the NRA had existed for 150 years and I saw that it was in trouble. And I looked at it and said, I believe some of my skill sets could be of value, could be of assist. And so I submitted my name and they ignored me, and I submitted my name, and we went through a couple of years of that, and I was nominated for the class of 2023. And then I got onto the board. So the timing was really good. I'd formally retired from my job and then I was available. So now I have the time, I have the inclination, and I'm actively involved in the board and the board operation.
And you're somebody who I would label a reformer. I don't know if you put that label on yourself, but you're somebody who saw the NRA's corruption scandal that was ongoing, that really went on for quite a while with the former CEO and executive vice president Wayne LaPierre, and a lot of the issues that surrounded how the organization was being run under his tenure. And you ran for the board under this idea that you wanted to change things, change how the group operates, right?
Well, they didn't quite have the reformers in the class of 2023. There was not the 2024 was when the 4-4 reform kind of brought
Right.
that up.
It wasn't an organized thing.
It wasn't
in
an organized.
2023.
People said to me, well, the NRA is in trouble. Why do you want on? Why are you joining now? Why don't you wait until it settles in? It's going to get ugly. And I'm like, if you don't run in when the building's on fire, who saves the building, right? And so I have to say that I was there to welcome the 4-4 reform and then the next groups of reformers. And, I just look at it as at the beginning, I'm not going to say reformer or not reformer. I'm a problem solver, and it had problems, and I am a data person and I'm a numbers person. And so in looking at data and looking at numbers, and it was like, some of this stuff just doesn't add up. And so, everybody's got like a BS filter at some point, and mine was pegging on the meter. And so it was really good to start to see others joining in, speaking up, and you'll see the more that people see me around, you'll see that my bumper sticker is, but if I'm going in, right? I'm in the middle of whatever the fray is, because you either care or you don't. And if you don't be there. So I care, and I care deeply.
And this is coming at a period where the board is essentially reasserted its control over the organization, or its say in what goes on. That was one of the problems that was revealed in the trial that happened, that the board was just had been kind of atrophied for a long time, and now I think it's fair to say that we're seeing this era of the board reasserting itself, and this new energy on the board. You've been at the center of that as you're describing here, and you're actually on the finance committee, which is one of the
Mhm.
more important boards committees at the NRA, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, the finance committee, the audit, there's a few that are truly, truly key instrumental committees. The thing that I'm going to say about before versus now, it was that the board was encouraged to sit down and shut up. And now it's encouraged to say, you've got skills, you've got abilities, you come with life experiences, you come with problem solving skills, whatever those are. Let's put you in the category where you could do the most good for the organization. And I have to say that the current officers, they took a really hard look at everybody and what their background was, and what their interest was, and where their skill sets were, and created these cohesive teams. So not only am I on the finance committee, I am also on the committee for leadership and reorganization, which is kind of looking at a variety of things, including some of the board rules, even board size potentially. How does a committee work? What do they do? So the committee for reorganization and leadership, I think, is going to be key and instrumental as things go forward. Additionally, I am the chairman of NRA Media, and that's one that right now, man, I'm using every bit of leadership skill and problem solving skill and coaching skill that I've got, because that's an area that's really shifting and changing.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of this restructuring that was announced recently in a moment. But
Mhm,
as far as the board makeup goes, or the organization's leadership and structure goes today, we had, and I don't want to oversimplify things to just say reformer versus old guard, or reformer
mhm.
versus. I think there were sort of two almost parties, the NRA 2.0 and strong NRA at one point. Um,
Yeah, a little bit.
uh,
It was a little political, and then there was some kind of independents that were in the middle going, "What?" Right?
right.
I don't know.
Yeah. So I don't mean to oversimplify things, but people who are the officers that are in position now, the executive
Mhm,
vice president, the president, Doug Hamlin and Bill Bockenberg were considered to be, they sort of ran on that reform platform.
mhm.
When you had officer elections last year, there are a lot of people that ran as reformers who won in the last election. It looks like the next election is the strong NRA sort of group is not really even fielding candidates. It seems it's mostly uh, from the outside. It appears the reformers have control. I mean, is that how you feel on the inside as well? What is your view of the internal structure of the NRA right now?
In the last series of meetings, it's very obvious that the reform group, or the change agent group, or whatever you wanna call them, had a lot more to say about, things. And, 1 second, I did these. Sorry. The world is always somewhere, right? But no, they had the reform group, the change agent group, they had a lot more to say, truly a lot more to say in where are we going, what are we doing, what are the changes, what are the milestones, what are the shifts. And so I have to say that the the prior leadership, there was a lot of lawyers. And we're an organization where I'm not sure we need that many lawyers, right? Or at least not within the organization. We need problem solvers. We need business people. We need people who are going to get up and do something. And so I think that that's what you're seeing. So we now have a slim majority. And so you have to be you have to explain, you have to walk through, you have to build your case, you have to kind of, lead everybody forward, lead them to the water, and then convince them why they want to drink, and you need to be persuasive about that and knowledgeable. So this next group of people that are running, it's going to be an even more interesting thing because it really is heavy on the reform side. It's some of the people that I fully expected to be on the ballot, some elected not to run, some have quit, and some did not get the signatures to be on the ballot. So it's going
Yeah.
to
Some
be a
key figures,
shifting
right?
dynamic. Yeah.
I think you were telling me before we started recording here that some of the most prominent members of the whatever you want to call the other faction, the strong NRA grouping, Bill Barr, the former president, Charles
Bob
Cotton, another former
Bob
president.
Bob
Sorry,
Barr.
Bob Barr, not Bill Barr. My
Bill Barr's a
mistake.
different guy that has equal, yeah.
Yes,
But
but a
no,
number of these figures are no longer on the NRA board.
they're names that all of our members know. They really are. Sandy Froman, past president. Charles Cotton, past president. David Coy, who was the second VP, I think. Bob Barr, past president. All of them in the last, let's say 6 weeks, 8 weeks, have resigned from the board for a variety of unspoken reasons. So some went to the foundation, some were at the foundation, and some were just, yeah, we're moving on, whatever that is, whatever that means. But they're names that people know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's interesting. So do you feel like this internal struggle that's gripped the NRA for, half a decade now, really, is perhaps over?
Never say never, never say it's over, and you can't, and you're not, it's that those people, those 4 names carried a lot of weight. There were 5 others who were very vocal in a lot of the members meetings and board meetings that elected not to run this time, that said, okay, my term is over. I've reached a certain age, or I've reached a certain whatever. And so the mix and the names and the faces are all shifting. And so, I want everybody to remember that there was no one on the board that didn't earn a place on the board, that wasn't a Second Amendment advocate first. This struggle inside the board, you still had to say everybody was Second Amendment related. We didn't agree, but the general mission was the same. It was, how do we get there? What do we do? And that's the part we didn't agree on.
But so this restructuring plan, as you mentioned a moment ago here, that we want to obviously talk in detail about. Do you feel that plan has been created and put forth with more of a unified vision for the future of the NRA?
I think it is a realistic look at the future of the NRA to make it so that the NRA has a future. I mean, because there was a lot of talk for a long time that the NRA was not going to make it. There really was, and that you, as you had said,
I think there still is some talk about that, right?
Right?
That's kind of why we're doing this episode, right? It's
Okay.
a concern.
Well, I'm going to be the first to say it's going to survive. It's going to end this year in the black for the first time in years, because we put together a budget, and in some cases, because of the slide in gun sales, in focus from people who are like, okay, my gun rights are not in jeopardy. So there's that always is a shift. Membership comes and membership goes depending on the political climate. Fear sells, crazy as it is, and so when people are in fear for losing their rights or fear for losing their guns, then they go join a group, and then that kind of fades away a little bit. So we have to be cognizant of what the gun industry is doing. We have to be cognizant of what the political climate is. And so I was at the Second Amendment Foundation's Gun Rights Policy Conference, and the numbers that they were rolling out to say what the gun manufacturers were experiencing this year in decline of sales, that's a number that concerns us and everyone else, everybody in the 2A space. And so because of that, the cuts, the shifts, the shift in dynamic, the furloughs that were put in place, all of those were because we are business responsible. And because we're looking at it going forward thinking, this NRA has existed for 154 years. We want it to exist for another 154 years. And in order to do that, like any good business, you look at it and you say, okay, maybe I have to do some cuts or some tucks or some shifts or some looking at it from different sets of eyes, because it isn't yesterday. It isn't your daddy's period of time. It's a new day. It's a new time. What are you going to do? And how are you going to do it? So that I believe that this shift is the responsible thing to do, and that it wasn't easy. It's a hard decision. I have personally sat in the spot where you had to look at people that you furloughed and you're like, they did nothing wrong. It's so much easier if you've got cause to fire somebody because they've already done it. You've given them warning. There's all this stuff. A furlough is an absolute innocent person who has a family and has a life. And all of a sudden you cut their legs out from under them because they don't now have the job that they had been putting their heart and soul in. It's a tough decision to make, and we did not take it lightly. And so our hope is to put the budget together, to put things together, to look at where our growth is, look at how we're doing things. And we're shifting and changing a variety of things so that we can call these people back, so we can bring them off of furlough, so that we can bring them back into the NRA family and we can continue to grow. But it's going to be a little different. And that's part of responsible business ownership, is looking at the business and not saying it's the same business it was 10 years ago. And
Yeah,
that's
I
kind of
mean,
where we're at.
that is something that at the Reload, we've been critical of some of these budgets that we've reported on the past, is just they don't really appear to take into account the reality of what
Mhm,
like political fundraising is like, that it's not always going to continue to go up or stay level, right? I
mhm,
remember reporting on a budget from a year or two ago where you're going from an election year where political fundraising tends to be higher to an
mhm.
off year, and it was still projecting out the same level of revenue, and that didn't
Right.
make any sense.
Mm,
So that's interesting to hear that you are, trying to take those sorts of factors into account with these moves. And you did mention there, it's something I was going to ask about. These are furloughs. I think there have been 36 is what's been reported by some of the other board members. I don't know if you can confirm that number or
No,
not, but
I actually can't, because there was no final report, and the
okay.
board is an advisory board where we kind of guide in the big picture, and yet the day-to-day operations happens inside the building in Fairfax, and that is not a board structure or board responsibility.
Okay,
So,
so you might not be able to give us the like exact number of what's
mhm,
going to happen, but obviously
mhm,
these furloughs are part of this restructuring plan.
mhm.
But you did say, yeah, furlough is an important word here. It's not a layoff. It's not necessarily permanent. Sounds like your hope is to be able to bring these people back at some point. Is that right?
That yeah, absolutely. That absolutely is the hope, yes.
And now over the years, obviously going back even before your tenure on the board, there have
Mhm,
been a number of layoffs at the NRA. You're down a couple hundred, from my understanding,
mhm.
from the peak of maybe 5, 6 years ago. But really, I think the peak was probably around 2018, but down a couple hundred employees. Do you know the number that the NRA still has on board?
No, I do not. I cannot. I saw it recently, but um it's one of those kind of things where you're looking at things in scope to other things, and it didn't stick in my head as to
Okay.
what that was.
I mean, it
The
sounds
funny
like the plan
part,
here. Oh, go
um
ahead. Sorry.
the funny part between 2018 and now, the one thing that I want to call your attention to, because I think that this is where the NRA really really went south. And that was when Letitia James came after the NRA for the lawsuit with the intent to absolutely decimate and take the NRA completely down, dismantle it, give its assets to the anti-gun groups. I mean, that really was her intent. Um, we had a marketing company, and there was a standard protocol inside the building, which was Wayne LaPierre or the marketing company were the two people who spoke for the NRA. No one else was allowed to. And so the divorce happened between Ackerman McQueen and the NRA. And so now the marketing company is gone. Wayne is gone. the lawyers suggested to Wayne prior to him leaving that he just stop talking. So we stopped talking about the NRA and all the good work it does and all the programs that it does and everything that it did in the political cycle and everything it does for training and education and, all the other stuff. We just stopped talking about it. And think about any other company that could survive for 6 years of zero marketing, because that's really a big piece of where we are and why we're in the pickle that we're in, is we stopped marketing. And so we have to take a really hard look at that and say, what are we doing and how are we getting the word out? Because if you start to talk to Second Amendment people, the majority of them do not know that we funded the Bruin decision. We funded the Bruin court case from beginning to end. So it is one of the most critical Second Amendment cases in our history, and nobody knows that the NRA was behind it.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Because the New York, sorry, New York Rifle and Pistol Association is,
Mm-hmm.
or State Rifle and Pistol Association is an NRA affiliate, and I think you're correct that a lot of people don't realize that or the role that the NRA played in that lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
But so getting back to the restructuring here for a second, because and that's part of this plan is how you're going to handle media
Right.
in this restructuring. You're completely changing the way that operations work, it sounds like, and it sounds like the goal is maybe to take the resources you have and stretch them a bit further by consolidating some of these things. Can you just walk us through exactly some of the top line notes of what the
Well,
restructuring does?
I think that the biggest thing that the restructuring does that the members will see, the biggest thing the members will see is that postage has gone up, the cost of paper has gone up, and the magazines come, and some people read them and some people don't read them, right? And so we are looking at it going, how do we keep content current? How do we keep it so that it is when it's happening? Because the cycle for a news magazine is it's almost a 2.5-month cycle from the time something happens and it's written about till it's published. So our goal is to go more immediate, more digital, and then we're working on how to, in addition to just making a digital magazine available to our members, how to make it so that there's more immediate news, that it comes to them sooner, that it's more topical to their interests, all of those kinds of things. And so that is going to be the focus and the program of the NRA media in the next quarter, for sure, is to exactly what we know. We had to do some cuts, and so part of those cuts are that our physical magazines will be changed to, you get them quarterly, but digital magazines will be monthly. But there's so many more pieces to it that we've got to be able to look at and put together.
Are you guys going to still focus on the same topics of interest as well? Because I know you're getting rid of like America's First Freedom, which I'm sure for our audience, that's the magazine that focuses more on the politics or the
Mm-hmm.
policy side of, what the NRA does. But it sounds like, from what I've read at least, that you're kind of hoping to consolidate that into the other marquee magazines.
Mm-hmm.
How's that process going to work? Are you still going to maybe hope to put out the same amount of stories, the same amount of same volume, or what's it going to look like?
The budget has not been approved yet. So the furloughs happened. The budget is being put together, and so we think the furloughs are put us in position for the budget. The budget has to be issued, it has to be considered, and it has to be approved. And at that point, so right now we're making tentative plans to say, if everything goes the way we want it to go, this is what it's going to look like. But until that's cast in concrete, and that will not be cast in concrete until the first week of January. Until then, we don't know exactly which chess pieces are still on the table. We don't know what our budgets truly look like. And so we're hoping that we can continue to produce the content that we've got, figuring out how to navigate it and get it into people's hands in a timely manner.
Beyond the magazines and the media side of things, what other restructuring is being done? I know you're consolidating some other operations as well.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily my area of expertise, so I get it the same way that you get it, right? In some cases. So, there are some insider information that comes through the board and the board meetings, or the it's a board meeting, but it's a Zoom evening, pull everybody together, give them the state of what is the changes. I too get some with finance. And so some of the problem, at least in my mind, is that I get confidential finance stuff, and then I get some board stuff, and then I get some public stuff. And I just need to walk very carefully, because I have a responsibility that there's some stuff that I just cannot can't roll out, because it's not mine to tell, if you know what I mean. And so I'm not real savvy to the other changes that were happening. And I think it'll probably take till January or till the first week of December, till the finance committee meeting, and then I'll have a much better idea of what it is and what's public.
And when do you think, like, your average NRA member will see what the new structure is going to look like and the effect of that?
I believe that they will start to know that things are happening in January. And then February, they'll start to see a shift. So we're working on what's the message to tell them, so that they've got some idea. Because as you said, a couple of the magazines are going away. They are no longer going to be in print. And so the people who have been getting those magazines are going to get notices that said, pick a different magazine. Your choices are this or that. Oh, by the way, we're going to go digital for this amount of time. So surprise. And we fully expect that there are people who are gonna push back some on that. I watched and I looked and I watched with interest a lot of the responses on social media when they rolled out the furloughs and they rolled out the magazine changes. D I would say that it was probably a 10-to-1 of good versus I want my magazines. So I think we'll be okay with it, and I think that people will get around to it, because I'm with that other group. I want my magazines, right? I mean, I'm used to it. I get it. I read it. I look at it, and change is hard. And so I too am gonna have to sit right next to you and go, okay, I'm mourning that magazine going away too. But I, at the same time, do I think that if we left them, do I think 10 years from now they would be there? No. So I think that this is a good shift. I think it's the right thing to do, but sometimes the right thing is painful, and that's kinda where we're at right now.
You already mentioned that you believe, or the projections are, that by the end of this year, the NRA these these reforms and cuts are going to make it so that the NRA is back in the black. It is not
Mhm,
losing money
mhm,
anymore. What can you tell us about the membership side of that? I know President Bill Bockenberg has said in an interview with Shooting News Weekly that you've started to regain members. Can you give us some more insight into that, as to maybe how many? Because that was the other problem you've been facing. It's sort of hand in hand, right? Because a lot of the NRA's money comes from its membership,
membership. Right.
paying dues. And so you've been losing membership for years now. And that's been something, obviously, the board, I'm sure, wants to reverse. It sounds like, according to the president, that perhaps you've started that process. What can you give us some more details?
I'm not seeing a lot of data yet. And I'm a data-driven person. But I will tell you that there's a couple things. One is, membership decline for a variety of reasons. And so, our general membership, some people renewed and then they continue to renew. And there was that. People joined for life memberships. And then there was brand new members. And the fact that we quit marketing for so long, that's the area that we were suffering. So we have just recently hired a new firm with new ideas that are going to work with us. And so they started the 1st of November. So I am extremely positive and extremely hopeful, and the information and the data that I've seen so far is leading me to believe that that we're going to have really good news in January. We're going to have even better news at the annual meeting because by that time they'll have a chance to really get their feet underneath them. But I think fundamentally we're doing the right things. We're looking in the right spots. We actually tore apart the data streams of how every member joins to us and looked at them to say where were the declines and what were they and what did they look like in the past and what do they look like now. I mean, truly looking at data to say, okay, what do we do? How do we do it? And how do we reach people? And then how do we keep reaching them and keep communicating with them to keep them engaged in the fight that is the fight that we have for the Second Amendment?
Um, and so the other area of concern that I wanted to get into that's come up recently is obviously these off-year elections
Mhm,
and some of the spending that we saw, because a lot of people undercount or underestimate how important I think the National Rifle Association has been to the gun rights movement when it comes to election spending. That is an area where the NRA has been the leader and really dominated for decades now when it comes to the gun rights movement, and oftentimes even compared to competition from the gun control groups out there. Usually, NRA had a history of being able to outspend them. This most recent election here, now it is an off year. It's a smaller stakes unless you live in Virginia or New Jersey or a couple of these states that had elections.
mhm,
It's not the midterms are going to be a higher profile fight, and those are federal elections, but it's still worth discussing because of the spending gap that we saw in especially Virginia, where the outcome is likely. I mean, one, that's where the NRA is based, of course,
mhm,
but two, the outcome is likely to lead to significant change in gun policy in the state because now Democrats have full control of the state house and the governor's mansion. So, from what we could see, public record wise, the reporting on this is not as robust as the federal elections, but
mhm,
the BPAP, which is a group that catalogs this, says the NRA spent, I think, about $25,000 in the Virginia elections. I, every town claims that it was actually more than that, about 32,000, but they also claim to have spent themselves 1.7 million, which is a gap of like 55 to 1. It's a huge, gap, and it's I don't think it's necessarily because every town is spending a lot more than they have in previous elections. It's more on the end of the NRA spending less. One, do you have any, like I said, the records, public records are not necessarily complete on this stuff in Virginia or New Jersey or Maine, but do you have any idea that those numbers are not quite accurate, or and if they are accurate, can you just walk us through why the spending was so down this year?
Actually, I cannot, and because it's just not my area of expertise at all. I've got some opinions, and those opinions don't even have anything to do with my being on the NRA board. I'm involved in politics in the state of Ohio, and so I see some of that. But I want to say that one of the things that you said to me while we were, off camera before we got started, um, wait, where was I going? Well, that was that, the NRA had always been the big dog in this, and there was no other Second Amendment group that was stepping into it. And I think that's a key piece is that because we'd been quiet for so long, that did not help the NRA ILA, which is a kind of a separate group than the NRA itself. And John Comerford and his group does an amazing job. Um, there is no other Second Amendment group, even though sometimes they're all talking trash about the NRA. There's not another one that's stepping into that fight. And so we're working on the think of it this way. The NRA has a laser pointer, and they say, look at this race, or look at that race, or look at this race over here. And all of their members are the cats, and they're chasing wherever the laser pointer is to go look at it and to get involved. The NRA has that strength, and they utilize that strength. Then additionally, then they run ads. They do a wide variety of things. So that is a machine that it runs on money. And so we need our members to be generous and to continue to support what the NRA does in that arena, because it is so absolute critical. But as to what we did and how we did it and how much money, not an area that truly came across my radar.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do understand obviously that the NRA is technically a coalition or a combination of a bunch of different legal entities, and that's
Mhm,
where the Institute for Legislative Action is the more lobbying group, and then there's the Political Victory Fund, which spends directly in elections, and then there's also a super PAC, and then that's common
mhm, mhm.
for major political groups. It's not an abnormal thing because of how our tax laws work. That's why you have to have these different entities, and so I understand you might not have the same level of insight into the political spending as you do on some of the other areas of the NRA.
Right.
But this does feel like perhaps is similarly connected to, just this restructuring, some of the cuts, and there's just not as
Mhm.
much money to go around. So there's not as much political spending right now. And it may be connected to the idea that if you can right the ship, you can get back to those levels that you were at before. Is that like
I
the hope
believe
here?
that there yes. We'll just say I believe yes. And I think the other thing to point out is that, and I'm not sure a lot of people are seeing or connecting the dots on this, is the funding from USAID that went into the anti-gun groups, and how much money was annually being funded by the US government to those. And so the numbers are somewhere between 34 and $40 million a year every year for the last who knows how long. So I think that you're going to start to see organizations, those organizations that are fighting against the things that the NRA fights for, that their funding is going to dry up because they no longer have your money to do their mission.
Not as sure on that. I'm more skeptical of those claims. I do remember seeing those at the time, and a lot of
Mhm,
it was uh, you know 6 degrees of separation sort of funding. Not that it didn't eventually get to a group like Everytown, or at least part one of these C3 versions
mhm,
of Everytown. I think some of it as well went to some of the NRA Foundation, for instance, for different groups, because oftentimes there were several groups between USAID funding and the end result. There was a lot of that sort of stuff. That's what makes me more skeptical that it's going to dry up funding for
mhm.
these groups. Obviously, they have, in every town's case, very wealthy benefactors like Michael Bloomberg, who um, fund a lot of what they do as well. I do think there is a difference in funding type. The NRA tends to rely more on individual
Mhm.
dues than a lot of the gun control groups do, since they rely more on large dollar donations. Not that the NRA doesn't get large dollar donations as well, but yeah, I'd be interested. I'd be skeptical that USAID going away is going to dry up
Let's
funding for those groups.
mark our calendars and let's talk again in a year.
Yes, certainly. But
We we both have a
that's my
theory,
only.
and we'll see where it
Yes,
is.
that's fair. But going back to this reform plan and
Mhm,
this what you guys are putting into motion here, because right now from the outside, obviously you can look at it and say, oh, these are bad things that are happening. There's furloughs, there's the lack of election spending. It sounds like your view is though that you're doing what's necessary to keep the NRA on level footing so that you can grow it when there are challenges down the line. I mean, it sounds like you think if you guys hadn't done these changes, that the group could go bankrupt even, or really bankrupt this time, right? Because that was one of the problems. is the
Sometimes
previous bankruptcy filing.
yeah, sometimes it's called right sizing, and you have to right size to your budget as much as you may not want to. Sometimes you have to tighten your belt and sometimes you have to shift and you have to look at it. And sometimes you have to look to say, where are we going? And, we've been going this direction, but where are we going? I mean, and engineering school had led me to a thing that came out years ago where a designer went to Switzerland with the digital watch. And they said, we've got this digital watch and we want to bring it to you because you guys are the greatest watchmakers. And they were told watches have hands and were sent on their merry way. And 20 years later, everyone was still wearing watches and most of them did not have hands. And now an additional 20 years, now I'm telling my age, an additional 20 years, the majority of the population does not wear a watch at all and only uses their cell phone. So so it really is that sometimes you have to look at it and say, okay, I'm in the business of making a watch. Does anybody want a watch? Right? What really are we what are we there for? What is our purpose? What is our major scope? Not what all are we doing? What should we be doing? And then we look at that and then say, okay, let's do that the absolute best we can. And I believe that as painful as this furlough stuff is, I believe this was a critical step in that direction.
Okay. All right. Well, I think, as you said a moment ago, time will tell. That's what we'll have to see what the results bring.
Mhm.
And when we have some of those results, I think we'd like to have you back on the show to discuss them. Maybe things will have turned around, and you can point to these changes as the catalyst for that.
Okay. So can we talk for a minute just about the elections that are coming up and what those are going to look like? And
Yeah, sure. I
you
mean,
know,
one thing I wonder too is like,
Mhm.
what do you view as the timetable for this? The this rebuilding effort that you're doing. Like, do you, what did next year's elections look like to you from the NRA's point of view? Do you think you'll be competitive, more competitive in those elections than you guys have been in this year's? There are certainly more widespread and important series of elections next year, the midterms.
So yeah, I mean, and you and I are talking about completely two different elections, but they really are
Oh, sorry.
important. No, no,
You
no,
meant the
no.
board elections.
I meant
We
the
can
board
also talk
elections
about that. Yes.
because there is that. But okay, so on the midterm elections, there are a lot of people who are it's really funny. There's a lot who are reaching out to me saying, "Okay, I'm running for this office or I'm running for that office. How do I get an NRA endorsement? Who do I talk to inside the building? What do I do?" So there is huge value in that NRA stamp of approval. There's huge value. And that's a piece that we want to celebrate and we want to continue. And so we want to have a value in saying you've got an F rating and you've got an A rating. Those are the types of things. I think the future is going to be interesting. We're going to wait and see. I personally, this is not. I've not talked to John Comerford. I don't have some inside scoop on that. Those guys are so interesting to sit and have a conversation with.
We'll have to have him on as well.
Yeah, he definitely that. But I think that waiting to see what the remapping does on gerrymandering and mapping in the different states and what happens and how that's shifting and who can. So the Louisiana court case that went to the Supreme Court, I think is going to be critical to the entire United States as soon as that decision is rolled out. And that's gonna change a lot of stuff for a lot of people. Everybody's gonna scurry once that result comes out. So I think until then, everything is just kind of a little bit up in the air.
But do you think you'll see from some fruits of these reforms by next year, perhaps? I mean, I'm sure you don't expect it to be overnight necessarily, but
So I mean, so for the NRA itself, I see the fruits already, and I see them You were at the board meeting when I know that it was midnight, right? I walked up to you and I was like,
Yes.
Do you know what you just saw? You just saw the moment that the NRA turned around and started heading in the other direction. So if you look at the NRA like it's a behemoth ship, we had to first stop moving forward. So we had to stop it and then start to turn it. And so to most members, they're not seeing the forward momentum. They are not really noticing it stopped. They may start to notice a turn, but we're fully in the turn and going to start in 2026. We're going to start full steam ahead. It's just going to be in a different direction. So I think that's where we're at, and I think that the reform stuff has been critical to get us there.
Okay. And so how do you view these upcoming board elections then? Like what,
So
I mean,
well,
do you think that'd be the culmination of all this, or
I
how are you
think
looking
I
at it?
really think it is because last year the NRA 2.0 group had a website called electanewNRA.com, and they bought an ad in the NRA magazine, and that was like nobody ever does that, right? Nobody ever did that. And so that was a shift saying to the members, hey, we want you to look and we want you to know more than the 150 word bio. We want you to look a little deeper into who's running for the board. So then Strong NRA, which was the old guard, if you will. I don't know what you want to call them. Because I don't want to call anything negative, right? Because everybody really, I disagree with them fundamentally on things, but at the same time, they're in there fighting the Second Amendment fight. But the other team, right? They too ran an ad. But our team got 20. We got 2/3 of the board members in the election, and so that changed the dynamic. This year, the nominating committee was ruthless in saying that if you were listed in the court documents, or if you were involved in this, or if you were on one of the key committees that look the other way, we're not nominating you. And because they were so ruthless in some of their comments and their statements and their research and their looking, there were members who had been on the board for quite a while who said, I'm not rerunning. Okay. And so with that changes the dynamic. And so this time I don't see a lot of those who were friends of Wayne that are going to be even on the ballot. And so the future looks pretty bright in that aspect. I'd say, check out the website, Elect a New NRA, and read about some of these members that want to be your board members, and get to know them and get to know their background and what they're doing and how they're fighting and if they're fighting and, all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, more than ever before, you can credibly say that this is a new NRA,
Mm-hmm.
that things are different now than they were a few years ago. But like I said, I appreciate you coming on, and I hope to have you back on again in the future. We talk a little bit more about what some of these reforms have actually led to,
Okay.
and how much movement you've seen on that turnaround of the big ship there at the NRA.
Okay. Yeah,
But
I'm pretty excited about it.
yeah, I could tell. But for those who want to, follow what you're doing more closely, if they want to see, more of your work in
Mhm.
particular, where can they do that?
Well, I'm pretty obvious on Facebook. I'm of the Facebook generation for sure. So there by my name, Amanda Suffecool. And then I have a nationally syndicated radio show that I talk Second Amendment stuff on Sunday nights. And so they can find me on my website, ionthetargetradio.com. And so those are kind of the two places that make it easy to find me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, appreciate you doing this. And I think that's all we've got for this week. We will see you guys again real soon.
No, the devil's got no